Welcome back. In the last video, I showed you how to set up HaxeFlixel and Visual Studio Code. In this video, I want to cover what each of these project files are doing. I'm also going to be printing hello world to the screen, as well as one more thing. Off camera, I did one extra minor thing that we didn't do last video, which was install the XML extension. All HaxeFlixel projects will recommend this in the project files. So I just did this off camera. It's very easy to get this just by searching XML and then installing that. Now back in the Explorer button, we have a bunch of project folders. The most important file to mention off the bat is project.xml. This is where all of your HaxeFlixel project settings live. For example, here is your window size. That's how big your window is going to be. And here is your window title. Just as an example, if we run line test netgo again, this is the default size of the window. If we just go ahead and change this to say 800 and something insane like, I don't know, 200, save the file and run again, you'll get a much narrower window. I'm going to undo those changes. So that's project.xml. That's all your project settings. You also have hxformat.json. You don't need to worry about this too much. It's just when, I'll show you an example of this later, but this is how Visual Studio knows how to format your code. And then we'll go through the folders one by one. At the top we have the .vscode folder. Basically, this folder contains settings for Visual Studio Code rather than HaxeFlixel. You won't have to touch this too much. The next one is the assets folder. This is where you'll put your sprites, your audio, your fonts, your JSON data, all this extra stuff that you would be adding to the game that isn't code. The export folder contains build information. This folder will appear once you start using Lime test or Lime build, which will create .exe files or netgo files or whatever that are used to run the game. And finally, we have the source folder, which is where your code lives. Main.hax is where your code starts. This is what's called the entry point. HaxeFlixel knows that this is the entry point because project.xml says so right here. Main.hx creates a new FLX game instance. More on that later in the series. And here we'll give it the play state. Without getting into too much detail, a state in HaxeFlixel is basically a place in your game where all of your graphics live, like a level in Super Mario Bros., for instance. We tell HaxeFlixel that play state is the first state in the game, and that is the one that should be loaded first. Before I do anything else, I'm going to actually increase the size of the screen so that you can see it a little better. That's a bit much. There you go. And down here, we'll write our first line of code. Trace, open bracket, double quote, hello world. And at the end, we'll do a semicolon. This will simply print hello world to the console. And we'll see that right now using Lime test netgo. Oh. Also, you need to save the file. I forgot about that. Lime test netgo. And there it is. Hello world is in the console. This is where we will be writing our Haxe code for the entire series. And there's one more code file that I didn't mention, which was AssetPaths.hx. In this file is a macro. And macros are black magic, and you probably shouldn't touch them as a beginner. But AssetPaths is still useful because it will know about assets that you have imported into your project. I will show an example of this now. I've imported this image into Visual Studio Code under the images folder. So it's under assets, images, snake.png. If you type in AssetPaths, you'll see the text files that are already in there, but no snake.png. For AssetPaths to know where your file is, you need to restart the language server. You can do this by restarting Visual Studio Code, or you can open the command palette, which is through View, Command Palette. And over here, you can type in restart and restart language server. Down here, it will say Haxe building cache. And once that's done, you can type in AssetPaths. Dot, and there's your snake PNG. All this is the file path of your image. You'll start using this more once you start using more HaxeFlixel features. Oh, and just to explain what hxformat is doing, this file down here, if we start moving all the code around and like making it, as long as we don't make any syntax errors, we'll start messing up the code a lot. And if we save, it'll put everything in its right place. So as long as you're not getting any errors, it'll clean up your code. In summary, we have the project.xml file, which contains the HaxeFlixel project settings. We have the .vscode folder, which contains Visual Studio Code settings. We have the assets folder, which is where all your images and audio and stuff is located in your project. You have an export folder, which is where your build files will live. And you have the source folder, which is where your code lives. And you have an hxformat.json, which just keeps your code neat and tidy. But that's about it. See you in the next one.